Everyone in the room thought the Korean Mafia boss was about to eat. Only the waitress knew he was about to die. The plate was already in his hands. The poison was already active. And if she was wrong, she wouldn't make it out of the restaurant alive. So she did the one thing no one is allowed to do. She touched his plate. The fork was already halfway to his mouth. The dish looked perfect, expensive, flawless, plated by a chef who didn't make mistakes. But Zaraya Mitchell saw it. Not because she was special, not because she was brave. Because she was used to noticing things no one else cared enough to see. Only those with the sharpest instinct see the danger before it strikes. If you recognize the power in Zaraya's silence, you belong in our inner circle. Click subscribe and turn on notifications. Don't let the next chapter of this empire pass you by. The garnish was wrong. The steam rose too thin, too sweet, and there was a faint shimmer in the air that didn't belong on food meant to impress a king. Her stomach dropped. Poison. Around her, the restaurant stayed calm. Crystal glasses clinked. Soft music floated through the room. Men in tailored suits laughed quietly, unaware they were seconds away from chaos. At the center table, Lee Kang-woo sat untouched by fear, relaxed, unreadable, dangerous even at rest. His brother, Lee Junyoung, scanned the room with cold precision. Security was tight, too tight. Which meant the danger wasn't coming from outside. Zaraya's hands tightened around the plate. If she said nothing, he would be dead in seconds. If she spoke, she would be dragged away before she finished the sentence. And if she was wrong, no one would apologize for killing a waitress. So she made a decision that split her life in two. She stepped forward like it was routine, like she belonged there, like she wasn't about to gamble her life in front of men who erased people for less. And in one smooth, silent motion, Zaraya swapped the plate. The fork stopped. The room didn't react. But something invisible shifted. Because in that moment, someone in the restaurant realized their plan had failed. And someone else realized the most dangerous woman in the room was the one nobody had been watching. No one screamed, no one moved. The music kept playing, soft and elegant, as if nothing dangerous had just happened. Lee Kang-woo slowly lowered his fork. He didn't look at the plate. He didn't look at the waitress. He looked at his brother. Lee Junyoung caught the exchange instantly. Zaraya felt it then, the weight of attention, not loud, not violent. Focused. The kind that decides whether you keep breathing. Junyoung stepped closer, his voice calm, polite, low enough that no one else could hear. Why did you touch that plate? It wasn't a question, it was a measurement. Zaraya kept her hands steady. In this room, shaking meant guilt. She chose her words carefully because the truth, spoken the wrong way, could sound like an accusation. I noticed an error, she said, in the service. Junyoung's eyes didn't soften. Errors didn't reach this table. Around them, the inner circle stayed relaxed, unaware they were sitting inside a failed assassination. Kang-woo finally spoke, quiet, controlled. Then tell me, he said, what kind of error decides whether a man lives? And just like that, Zaraya understood something terrifying. This wasn't about the plate anymore. It was about whether she could prove the truth without pointing a finger, before the real enemy tried again. The steam was wrong. Zaraya had served this dish dozens of times. Same cut of meat, same reduction, same final flourish meant to impress men who paid more for dinner than she earned in a month. She knew how it should rise. Slow, rich, almost lazy, carrying the clean warmth of butter and wine. This steam lifted too fast. Too thin, too eager. It curled upward in a way that didn't cling to the plate, didn't settle into the air. And beneath the sweetness, just faint enough to be missed by anyone not trained to notice, there was a sharper note. Metallic, chemical, out of place in a restaurant built on perfection. Zaraya didn't gasp. She didn't freeze again. She leaned into what she'd learned surviving rooms where mistakes weren't forgiven. She checked the garnish. The herb sprig angled left instead of right, small, almost insulting in how subtle it was. The kind of change meant to look accidental, The kind meant to pass inspection because no one important ever inspected their own food. Across the table, Lee Kang-woo sat exactly as he had moments ago. Still, composed, dangerous without moving. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't demanded answers. He didn't need to. His presence pressed down on the room like gravity, bending attention toward him whether he acknowledged it or not. Men like him didn't rush. They waited. The world adjusted. Zaraya felt that weight now. She could feel his gaze without looking up, calm and unreadable, as if he were observing a chessboard already arranged to his liking. He didn't smell the poison. He didn't see the steam. He didn't need to. He was used to threats announcing themselves loudly. This one whispered. Her mind replayed the moment in the service corridor earlier, the plate handed off without eye contact, the chef's apology too smooth, too rehearsed. A private dinner labeled secure. Security that watched doors instead of hands. The danger hadn't entered the restaurant. It had been invited in. Zaraya kept her posture respectful, her expression neutral. Panic would turn her into a suspect. Confidence would turn her into a liar. She chose precision. Lee Junyoung shifted closer, silent as a shadow. His eyes flicked from her face to the table, to the plate that no longer sat in front of his brother. He noticed everything, but not the steam. Not yet. Zaraya understood, then why it had fallen to her. In rooms like this, power made people blind. And invisibility had finally made her dangerous. Lee Junyoung didn't raise his voice. He didn't step into her space the way men did when they wanted to scare someone. He simply turned. And when his eyes settled on Zaraya, the rest of the room faded out. Service is usually faster at this table, he said calmly, lifting his glass as if commenting on the wine. Was there a delay? The question was harmless, polite, something any guest could say. But his gaze never left her hands. Zaraya adjusted the napkin by instinct, slow and deliberate. In a luxury restaurant like this, movement was language. Sudden meant guilty. Careful meant trained. There was a plating correction, she replied, keeping her tone light, professional. I didn't want the chef's mistake to reflect on the guest. Junyoung's mouth curved slightly. Not a smile, a measurement. Interesting, he said, because that dish passed 3 checkpoints. He swirled the drink in his glass. Ice clicked softly. To anyone watching, it looked like casual conversation. To Zaraya, it felt like a blade tracing her pulse. She didn't rush to defend herself. That would look rehearsed. Instead, she mirrored him. Then someone changed it after, she said, which is why I intervened. A beat passed. Kang-woo remained silent, his presence steady at the center of the table. He didn't interrupt. He didn't rescue her. He allowed the moment to stretch, as if watching how long she could stand without support. Power didn't need to speak. Junyoung leaned back slightly, nodding as if satisfied. And if you're wrong, he asked, voice still calm, you touched something that didn't belong to you. Zaraya met his eyes for the first time. Then you'll correct my mistake, she said evenly, the same way I tried to correct the chef. Around them, suits laughed. Cutlery clinked. The string quartet drifted through another elegant note. The restaurant continued pretending nothing dangerous was happening. But Junyoung noticed the detail that mattered. Across the table, one man had gone still. Too still. In a world of traitors, a woman this loyal is rarer than gold. Show your respect for Zaraya's courage. Smash the like button if you believe loyalty should always be rewarded. His fingers hovered over his glass without lifting it. His eyes flicked, just once to the untouched plate now sitting in front of someone else. A micro-reaction, barely a breath. Junyoung caught it. He looked back at Zaraya, studying her not as staff, but as an anomaly. And for the first time since the plate had been swapped, Zaraya realized something chilling. She wasn't being questioned anymore. She was being protected, just long enough to see if she was telling the truth. The trap came quietly. Junyoung glanced toward the edge of the table, then back at Zaraya, his tone shifting just enough to sound certain. That plate was already cleared, he said. I watched it leave the table, so tell me, why did you touch it again? The words landed softly. but the implication was lethal. A cleared plate meant no reason to intervene. A cleared plate meant fabrication. A cleared plate meant she'd acted without cause. Around them, the Korean Mafia inner circle continued their low conversation, unaware, or pretending to be, while security maintained the illusion of calm. This was how power operated here. Executions happened behind manners. Zaraya felt the heat crawl up her spine. This was the moment that broke people. The moment where panic rushed in and betrayed the truth. She didn't rush. She replayed the sequence in her head. The pass, the handoff, the steam, the timing. Then she shook her head, once politely. "No," she said, "it wasn't cleared." Junyoung's eyes sharpened. "I personally signaled for it," he replied smoothly. "My brother hadn't touched it yet." Zaraya inhaled through her nose, slow, controlled. "You signaled for the table to be reset," she said, "not the plate." She gestured subtly, barely lifting her hand. The glassware was adjusted, the cutlery was aligned, but the dish never left the table. The heat was still active. Silence. Lee Kangwoo shifted slightly in his chair, not enough to be obvious, enough to matter. Zaraya continued, her voice steady because it had to be. If it had been cleared, the steam would have collapsed. It didn't. It rose. Junyoung stared at her for a long second, not blinking, not nodding. Then he smiled. Not approval, confirmation. "You're very observant for a waitress," he said. "I have to be," Zaraya replied. "Mistakes in rooms like this don't get forgiven." Kangwoo finally looked at her. His gaze wasn't curious. It wasn't angry. It was assessing. The kind of look that decided whether something was useful or disposable. "And if you misread the steam," he asked quietly, "if there was no poison?" Zaraya didn't flinch. "Then I disrespected you," she said, "and I accept the consequences." That was the truth, and they both knew it. Across the table, the man who had gone still earlier reached for his glass. Too fast. Junyoung's hand moved instantly, resting over the glass before it could lift. "Not yet," he said pleasantly. The assassin froze. The test was over. And Zaraya understood something chilling as Kangwoo leaned back, calm as ever. She hadn't survived because she was brave. She survived because she was right. And in the world of Korean mafia power, being right was more dangerous than being afraid. The shift was subtle, but it was there. The man across the table forced a smile that arrived half a second too late. His shoulders loosened, then tightened again, as if he'd remembered where he was. Relief flashed through him, sharp and uncontrolled, before discipline dragged his expression back into place. Too fast, too nervous. Junyoung didn't move, but his attention narrowed. Kangwoo noticed too. Power like his didn't miss changes in rhythm. He remained silent, letting the room expose itself. Zaraya felt it then, the moment when danger changed tactics. A junior server approached with a polished tray, moving smoothly between tables. Dessert service. Chocolate-glazed perfection arranged like art. The kind of luxury that disarmed suspicion. The server paused at Kangwoo's side, hesitating just long enough to be noticeable. "I'm so sorry," the server said softly, eyes lowered. "The chef sends his apologies for the earlier confusion. He's prepared a complimentary course." Apologies in rooms like this weren't generosity. They were leverage. Zaraya's pulse thudded. Desserts cooled quickly. These were still warm. Too warm. She caught the faintest tremor in the server's hands, not fear but urgency, as if the tray needed to land now, as if time was running out. Kangwoo didn't respond. He didn't nod. He didn't dismiss it. He waited. The silence stretched until the server shifted his weight. That was all it took. Junyoung stepped in casually, fingers brushing the edge of the tray as if adjusting placement. "Hold on," he said pleasantly. "We'll decide." The server's eyes flicked, just once, toward the man who'd gone still earlier. Confirmation. Zaraya's gaze dropped to the dessert. The glaze reflected the chandelier light too cleanly. The scent was sweet, but underneath it lurked the same sharpness she'd caught before, masked better this time. Smarter. The assassin had adjusted. Kang Wu finally spoke. "You said the chef sent this." "Yes, sir," the server replied quickly. "Then he can wait," Kang Wu said. "I don't rush corrections." The server swallowed. Around them, the inner circle continued eating, laughing softly, unaware that a second assassination attempt was collapsing under its own weight. Junyoung leaned in toward Zaraya, voice low. "Same judgment." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Different delivery." That was all he needed. Junyoung straightened, smiling warmly at the table. "Kitchen staff rotation," he announced lightly. "Nothing to worry about." Two men in suits appeared beside the server, guiding him away as if escorting a guest. No struggle, no noise. Across the table, the assassin's glass finally slipped from his fingers, shattering softly against marble. Kang Wu watched the spill, unbothered. Then he looked at Zaraya. The predator became the prey the moment she stepped in. "We want to hear from the masterminds watching. What would you have done if you were in Zaraya's shoes? Drop your strategy in the comments below." The title of the night had already been written. The Korean Mafia boss had been poisoned. And the black waitress was the reason he was still alive. The room didn't quiet when Lee Kang-woo spoke. It didn't need to. His voice was low, measured, almost gentle, yet it cut through the restaurant more cleanly than a shout ever could. Conversations nearby softened on instinct. Laughter dimmed. Even the music seemed to recede, as if the air itself leaned closer to listen. "Miss Mitchell," he said. Zaraya felt her name land like a hand on her spine. She turned fully toward him, posture straight, eyes steady. This wasn't fear anymore. This was attention, and attention from a Korean mafia boss was never neutral. "You intervened twice," Kang-woo continued, folding his hands calmly on the table. "Once without permission, once without hesitation." He looked at the untouched dessert, then at the space where the first plate had been. "I didn't ask if you were correct," he said. "I'm asking something else." Zaraya waited. Silence here was safer than guessing. "What were you willing to lose?" Kang-woo asked softly. "To stop me from eating." The question was surgical. Not why she did it. Not how she knew. What she was prepared to sacrifice. Zaraya swallowed, choosing honesty over drama. "My job," she said. "My freedom, my life." Kang-woo studied her face, not searching for fear but for calculation. He was used to liars begging, used to allies bargaining. Zaraya did neither. "And if there was no poison?" he asked. "Then I disrespected you," she replied, publicly. A ripple passed through the inner circle. Disrespect carried consequences here. "And," Kang-woo prompted. "And I would accept whatever you decided," she finished. Junyoung's jaw tightened slightly. He knew what that answer meant. She hadn't acted for reward. She hadn't acted to be seen. She had acted because she couldn't unsee the danger. Kang-woo leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. The gesture looked relaxed. It was control reasserting itself after threat. "You understand," he said, "that saving my life does not guarantee your safety." "Yes," Zaraya said. "In fact," he continued, "it may have made you more visible." She met his gaze. "I know." A beat passed. Then Kang-woo nodded once. "Good," he said quietly, "because invisible people don't survive long in my world." He turned his attention to the table, lifting his glass at last. The motion signaled something unspoken. Final. The remaining guests resumed breathing. The danger didn't leave, but it settled. Kang-woo looked back at Zaraya one final time. "Stay close," he said. "Tonight isn't finished." And in that moment, Zaraya understood the shift. She hadn't just stopped a poisoning. She had stepped into the line of sight of a man whose enemies never stopped trying, and whose protection was as dangerous as his wrath. Zaraya didn't accuse anyone. She didn't point. She didn't whisper a name. She did what she'd learned to do best. She controlled the moment. "Sir," she said softly, eyes on Kang-woo, "may I correct the service order?" The phrasing mattered. It sounded harmless, routine, a waitress asking permission to slow things down. Kang-woo studied her for a fraction of a second, then inclined his head. A signal so subtle only Junyoung noticed it. Proceed, Kangwoo said. Zaraya turned to the table with practiced calm. For quality assurance, she said, lifting the dessert tray slightly, the kitchen recommends a brief rest before serving. Temperature affects the glaze. No one argued with quality. She set the tray down, not in front of Kangwoo, but on the side station beneath the chandelier's light, close enough to observe, far enough to delay. Seconds passed. The room breathed again. Conversations resumed in low tones. The assassin had time to think. That was the point. Zaraya adjusted a clean silver spoon beside the dessert, letting its polished surface hover near the steam. She didn't touch the dish. She didn't contaminate anything. She simply waited. The glaze dulled faster than it should have. The steam thinned again, too sharp, too fast, then wavered, reacting to the cooler air. Zaraya's eyes tracked the change. She lifted the spoon, tilting it so the metal caught the vapor. A faint discoloration bloomed along the edge, barely visible, but wrong. She didn't announce it. She let Junyoung see it. His gaze snapped to the spoon, his jaw set. Across the table, the man who'd gone still earlier shifted in his seat. Once, twice. His fingers tapped the marble, then stopped. Sweat gathered at his temple despite the cool room. Delay had become exposure. Is there a problem? The man asked too quickly, forcing a laugh. We've been waiting. Kangwoo's eyes lifted to him, calm and unreadable. Waiting, he echoed. Zaraya stepped back, hands folded. She'd done enough. Junyoung moved in one smooth motion, lifting the spoon and placing it back down, blocking the dessert from view. Kitchen protocol, he said pleasantly. We'll take it from here. The man's smile cracked. No need, he said, reaching for his glass again. Junyoung's hand settled over it, gentle but immovable. That wasn't a suggestion, he replied. The table went quiet, not with fear but with understanding. Something had been decided. Kangwoo didn't look at the dessert again. He looked at Zaraya. You showed restraint, he said, and patience. She met his gaze. Accusations cause panic, she said. Proof causes silence. Kangwoo nodded once. Somewhere behind them, chairs shifted. Men stood. The restaurant kept its elegance, its music, its illusion. But the poisoner had revealed himself, not by words, but by impatience. And Zaraya had proven the truth without saying a name. No one screamed. That was the strangest part. The restaurant stayed beautiful, gold light, polished marble, the soft clink of glassware. To anyone watching from a distance, it looked like another flawless night of power and money. The illusion held because that was how the Korean Mafia preferred it, control without spectacle. Junyoung moved first. He didn't signal. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stepped to the side of the table as if adjusting the flow of service. Two men in tailored suits mirrored him from opposite angles, their timing so precise it looked rehearsed, which it was. The man who had been sweating noticed too late. His chair shifted back an inch, just enough. Junyoung's hand landed on his shoulder, light, almost friendly. Careful, he said pleasantly. You'll spill your drink. The pressure increased. Not enough to bruise, enough to anchor. Another man appeared at the assassin's other side, blocking the aisle with his body while pretending to examine his phone. A third casually positioned himself behind, cutting off retreat. No grabbing, no shouting, just space disappearing. Zaraya watched it happen with a steady breath. This was how power closed its fist, quietly, without warning. Is something wrong? The man asked, trying to laugh it off. His voice cracked halfway through. Junyoung leaned closer, still smiling. That depends, he said, on how much noise you make. The man swallowed. Around them, waitstaff continued moving. Plates were cleared. Wine was poured. A nearby couple laughed at a private joke, unaware they were 3 feet from an arrest that would never be recorded. Kangwoo remained seated. He didn't need to stand. His authority radiated outward, unquestioned. He lifted his glass, took a slow sip, and watched as if observing a demonstration he'd already mastered. The assassin tried once more to move. Junyoung's grip tightened briefly. The message was delivered without pain. Walk, Junyoung said softly. They guided him away from the table, steps measured, unhurried. To anyone glancing over, it looked like a guest being escorted to the restroom. Respectful, discreet. The music swelled slightly, covering the soft scrape of a chair leg against marble. Zaraya felt the shift as they passed her, a release of pressure, followed immediately by something heavier. Attention. Jun Young glanced back at her, eyes sharp but approving. The capture had worked because of timing, because of patience, because she'd forced the assassin to reveal himself without ever accusing him. Zaraya just proved that the most dangerous person in the room is the one nobody is watching. Are you enjoying this Afro-Korean power play? Share this video with one person who appreciates a story where the underdog takes the throne. Kang-woo set his glass down. Resume, he said quietly. And just like that, the night returned to normal. Except it was. The poison was neutralized, the threat was contained. And the black waitress who had swapped a Korean Mafia boss's plate now stood at the center of something far more dangerous than a meal gone wrong. She had been seen. And in this world, being seen meant nothing would ever be simple again. They didn't drag him far. Just beyond the private dining wing, past a corridor lined with art no one ever stopped to admire, the doors closed softly behind them. The restaurant's music faded into a distant hum, replaced by silence so complete it felt deliberate. The man's composure collapsed the moment the last door shut. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he said quickly, words tumbling over each other. I was told it would look like an accident, a reaction, no witnesses. Jun Young said nothing. He let the man speak. People always did when they realized there was no escape. Kang-woo entered last, unhurried. He didn't remove his jacket. He didn't raise his voice. His presence alone restructured the room. Who paid you? Kang-woo asked calmly. The man hesitated. That was enough. Debt, he blurted out. My brother. He borrowed from the wrong people, a rival crew overseas. They said if I didn't cooperate, my family would disappear. Kang-woo nodded once, as if confirming something he already knew. A rival faction doesn't threaten families, he said quietly. They threaten territory. The man's eyes widened. It wasn't just them, he admitted. There was help inside, someone in procurement, someone who knew the schedule. They said tonight was perfect, private, secure. If you died here, it would look like a collapse. A collapse. Zaraya felt the weight of that word settle into place. Kang-woo's death wouldn't have ended anything. It would have started everything. Power would fracture. Alliances would shift. Blood would follow uncertainty. The illusion of order would shatter across cities that depended on his restraint. That's why the poison, Jun Young said quietly. Clean, no gunfire, no witnesses. The man nodded frantically. They said once it happened, blame would spread. Everyone would suspect everyone. No one would know who to trust. Kang-woo looked at him for a long moment. And you believed chaos would spare you? I believed it would end, the man whispered. Kang-woo turned away, already finished with him. The outcome had been decided the moment the plate was altered. Remove him, Kang-woo said. The men moved instantly, guiding the poisoner down a side hall that led nowhere guests were allowed to see. Zaraya remained still, absorbing the truth she hadn't known she was uncovering. This hadn't been about greed alone. It had been about leverage, about families, about turning loyalty into weapons. Kang-woo faced her again. You understand now, he said softly, why a single bite would have mattered. Yes, Zaraya replied. Good, he said, because you didn't just stop a murder. He paused, eyes steady. You stopped a war. And for the first time that night, the danger she felt wasn't behind her. It was in front of her, waiting to see what her new awareness would cost. The dinner resumed, as if nothing had happened. Wine was poured, plates were replaced. Laughter returned in measured tones, the kind that belonged to men who believed the world would always bend back into shape for them. From the outside, the ultra-luxury restaurant looked untouched, another flawless night of money, power, and quiet control. But Zaraya felt the difference. It moved through the room like a current. Lee Kang-woo rose slowly from his seat. The simple act commanded attention without demanding it. Conversations softened. Chairs stilled. No one needed to be told this mattered. He lifted his glass, not high, not ceremoniously. "To a corrected evening," he said calmly. A few men nodded. A few echoed the toast. The words meant nothing to them. They meant everything to her. Kang Woo's gaze shifted, settling on Zaraya where she stood beside the service station. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't explain. He simply spoke with the same certainty he used to move entire organizations. "Miss Mitchell will remain close," he said. "She is under my consideration." The phrase was polite. The meaning was absolute. Junyoung caught her eye and gave a slight nod. It wasn't reassurance. It was confirmation. The inner circle understood immediately. Eyes flicked toward her quick, assessing, recalibrating. She felt the shift in how she was seen, not as staff, not as background. As someone claimed. Zaraya's chest tightened, not with fear but with clarity. This wasn't protection the way movies framed it. This was visibility. And visibility in the Korean Mafia world carried weight. She had crossed an invisible line when she swapped that plate. Now the line was etched in stone. Kang Woo sat again, unbothered, his survival already absorbed into the night's rhythm. The threat was gone. Control restored. But Zaraya didn't feel restored. She felt altered. As service continued, other staff moved around her carefully, respectful, curious, aware that something had changed without knowing exactly what. She caught her reflection briefly in the polished surface of a wine bucket. Same uniform, same posture. Different gravity. When the night finally began to wind down, Kang Woo stood once more, adjusting his jacket. He paused beside her, not close enough to invite conversation, but close enough to be unmistakable. "You did what others couldn't," he said quietly, "and what most wouldn't." Zaraya met his eyes. "I did my job." A corner of his mouth lifted, not a smile, but acknowledgement. "No," he said, "you chose not to disappear." He turned away then, already moving on, already surrounded. Zaraya watched him go, understanding settling deep in her bones. The Korean Mafia boss had survived because she acted. And the black waitress, who once moved unnoticed through rooms like this, would never be invisible again. That was the reward. And the risk. And the beginning of a life where being untouched no longer meant being unseen. Zaraya is no longer just a waitress. She is the king's shadow. But in this world, protection is just another word for danger. If you're ready to see how Kang Woo claims what belongs to him, make sure you've LIKED and SUBSCRIBED. The next episode is coming, and you won't want to miss the moment the world realizes who she really is. Join the family now.